Adrian Plank is under the weather today, so he's not going to be able to join us. Instead, we'll hear from Stephen Weber and Gregg Bush, and I guess the format is about 15 minutes to present the bills you have, and also, or we'll pre-file, and also your expectations and hopes for the upcoming session. And let's start with our new state senator, Stephen Weber.
Thanks, Al. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, that's good.
Yep, sounds good.
First off, I just want to say thank you to everybody. This is the first time that we've had a Democrat representing Boone County in the Senate in since 2008, so 16 years.
Wow.
And I know it's something that a lot of people have been working on for a long, long time. And so I'm grateful for all the help you have, and I'm excited that we finally got this done, and excited that we'll have a Democrat representing us in the state Senate again, like we did for decades prior to 2008. And a lot of you that are on the Zoom were at my first event almost 17 years ago, running for the state house. So just very, very grateful. And I want to say thank you to everybody for all the work you've done, both for me over the last couple of decades and also for Democrats across Boone County over the last couple of decades. So I appreciate that. So just to give everybody a sort of background on what the first couple of weeks, I guess, look like. So I get elected in, election day, end of November, any state senator would. And then pre-filing is December 1st, which is about three and a half weeks later. And then sort of in that mix, obviously, is Thanksgiving. So the first, and I think Gregg can probably relate to this on the House side, the first year is maybe the most chaotic because you don't have your bills drafted. You can't get them drafted until the election. You don't have a lot of time to get them drafted. A lot of other people come in with other bills already from previous years. And so I filed sort of a package of bills that I think are important. I'm excited to talk about, but some of the more complicated stuff I've been working on, I couldn't even get it pre-filed in 3 weeks without the drafting help. I've got an office assigned. It's 329. It's if you're familiar, it's the office that Chuck Graham had when he was in the state Senate. I got a chance to pick towards the end. There was a few offices to choose from, and I wanted to choose the one the last Democratic senator from Boone County had because I thought that was kind of a nice full circle touch. So if you're in his office 16, 17 years ago, it's the same place. And we're having obviously the governor's inauguration is January 13th. It's a Monday. So the big Capitol open house is that evening. And so we have drinks and food in my office. So if you're able to make it to Jeff City, we'd love to have you. And my office will be 329. You can come by and see me. I don't have an email address yet. I don't know if Gregg does or not on the House side. I don't have a phone yet. And I got my staff that's going to be working for me, but they don't officially work for me, and I'm not an official state employee yet. So it slows things down a little bit. But that'll January 1st, they'll be officially working for me. And so I'll be having Carly Seek. A lot of you know Carly. She ran Barbara Buffalo's campaign for mayor, worked on Kip's campaign for commission, and then was my campaign manager. So she's going to be my chief of staff. She's been in LA in the Senate for the last couple of years for Greg Razor out of Kansas City. So this is a promotion for her for her first time being chief of staff. But I think she'll do a great job. And then Houston Roberts, he's from St. Joe. He's been in LA in the House for the last couple of years. He's going to be coming over to be my legislative assistant. So that'll be my team. And I'm really excited to have them get to work for us and for everybody in Boone County as well. So that's sort of the background on what's kind of been happening for the last month and what going in this looks like. So in terms of filing bills, my goal was to file, things that I personally care about, things that reflect my values and the values of our community. But I also wanted to be sure to file bills that reflected the fact that there's been a change in Boone County and that this is a county that is elected Democrats everywhere, obviously except for 44 in the county when there's just a countywide vote. I wanted to file things that the senators from the last 16 years that have represented Boone County wouldn't have filed. So I wanted people to know that there's been a change, and I wanted Democrats in Boone County to know that their voices are being heard, and that the fact that we won this race is going to be reflected in the values that the senator from Boone County fights for. So that was kind of my thinking going into it. And I'm going to talk about 4 bills that I have filed that I think would be of particular interest to this group. So the first thing I filed, very first bill. Oh, and I should also back up and say it works a little different in the House. In the House, you pre-file your bills, and then the Speaker send your bills to committee, and Greg will find this out, but the speaker has to refer your bills, but he doesn't have to refer them in any order. So he refers his friends' bills, he refers Republican bills first, and then he'll refer Democratic bills to committee, at the very end of session when they can't pass. In the Senate, you file your bills in groups of three, by seniority. So I was towards the back of the group of three. So every senator files three. And then once everybody's filed three, they recycle it again. Everybody gets to file another three. And they have to be referred to committee in order. So, for example, every Republican can get, because they have, they go first ahead of me, can get three bills referred to committee before I get any bills referred to committee because of the way they file groups of three. But they can't get to their fourth bill until they've referred my first three bills. Does that make sense to everybody? That's kind of complicated, but and so I say that to say that the order, when I say the first thing I filed was the repeal of charters in Boone County. I did that first for a couple of reasons. One, obviously to send a message that that's important to me, but two, they're going to have to refer it to committee. It doesn't mean they're going to have to hear it in committee, but they're going to have to refer it to committee. There's no way they cannot refer that bill to committee, which would be good. So the first thing I did was a repeal of charter schools in Boone County. As you all know, that was something that was rammed through by Rowden and others at the very end of session last year. For some background on this, because I have talked to some of the lobbyists that are advocating, obviously, for the advocated for that bill. And I told them, like, look, we can fight this bill for the next 8 years. And if we don't get it done, whoever comes after me, it's going to be a Democrat. They're probably going to file it too. So we can fight this for the rest of your life if you want. But I'm going to push on this until we get it done. I'm going to push on it every single year. And I filed it first to make it clear to everybody that we're going to fight about this every single year. And the reason is because I think it's a really bad thing for Columbia Public Schools in particular, who I think is the target of this bill, and for Boone County at large. And the problems with the charter stuff in Boone County are multifaceted. One, the way that the revenue works is when a charter school opens, the local funding that we voted to tax ourselves, our own property taxes, would be diverted from local public schools to go to fund the charter. And we as taxpayers, as citizens, as voters, we have an opportunity to vote for a school board. And if we don't like the direction that our school district is going, or something our school district is doing, we can run for school board, we can support somebody else for school board, we can go to a school board meeting and make our voices heard. It doesn't mean we control everything, obviously, that our tax dollars happen, but there's a venue for us to advocate for ourselves and in the tax dollars that we are paying. With a charter school, that money would be taken from our local tax base, but there'd be no process for us to provide any sort of oversight, any sort of accountability, anything like that over what the charter school was doing or how they spent that money. And that's just fundamentally unfair. It's unfair that folks in Columbia and folks in Boone County and nowhere else in the state outside of St. Louis or Kansas City would tax themselves through property tax and then lose control of where those tax dollars go because their locally elected school board couldn't provide any oversight. And I think it's incredibly telling, and I've said this, continually, I'm going to say this until everybody's sick of hearing it, that the Republican supermajority has only expanded charter schools in Democratic controlled areas. There is no area represented by a Republican senator that has charter schools. 100% of them are in districts that Democrats represent. So they weren't voted for by the Democrats. So Republicans continually thrust this on Democratic areas and carve out their own hometowns, their own communities. They want to subject Columbia to educational policy that they refuse to subject their own communities to. And I can't think of anything that's more clear about what a scam this all is, by the fact that they would force it on people of the minority party. And if you say, okay, well, how about your area? They say, oh, well, no, it doesn't work for my area because X, Y reason. Okay. So look, they want it on somebody else's dime. The other problem is that Columbia Public Schools is growing rapidly. Like this is a great problem to have. We're one of the top 5% districts in the state in terms of growth, which means that there's a lot of planning that has to go into where schools are going, where the lines are being drawn, and that a charter school can just pop up in an area that and just completely complicate the planning, the school district lines, the busing situation. and then also can just disappear randomly. And next year it cannot be there. And all of a sudden the school has to have an influx, the district has to have an influx of children that they have to educate. So it's just a mess all the way around. And so that's the first bill that I filed. And I think it's going to be incredibly controversial. There's no way that it's going to get done just on people's goodwill. It's going to have to get done because I talk about it continually and I push on it continually, and I wait for opportunities that I have some leverage, which I'm excited about trying to identify, and then using that leverage to try to return some control of our local schools to Columbia people. So that's the first bill I filed. Not the last you're going to hear about it, unfortunately, because it's going to be a process, but it's something I'm committed to doing because I really believe that our schools, is the backbone of this community, and whatever we have to do to fight for them, I'm down to do. So that's the first thing. The second bill I filed that might be kind of interesting is Veterans Day off for University of Missouri employees. And that might be interesting to this group because I know there's a lot of Missouri retirees on this, on the as part of the Muleskinners. And one of the things that has really frustrated me deeply is somebody who, grew up in Columbia, parents retired from the university, a lot of friends that I grew up with work at the university, which is that objectively, the benefits package for current Mizzou employees is not as good as it was for their parents. Being a Mizzou employee today is not as good a job or lifestyle or whatever, however you want to say it, as it was for my generation's parents and my own parents. And that's reflected in a lot of different things. That's reflected in pay scales that haven't kept up. That's reflected in parking situations. That is, did I lose everybody? Or am I still here? Okay. That's reflected in parking situations that are just you wouldn't even recognize as Colombians that are so used to sometimes being able to walk to work or have short walks, but now paying and taking shuttles places. That's reflected in pensions, a defined benefit pension that was reduced and then ultimately eliminated in favor of 401ks. It's and one of the things that it's been reflected in is days off. There's just less days off for staff than there used to be. They got rid of personal days. And so this is part of my effort to try to restore some benefits to university employees. And Greg heard this at a meeting we had the other day. Um, there was a prevailing attitude in Boone County for a long time that supporting university was, I think, supporting what the goals the university laid out. And I view it a little bit differently. The board of curators has a lot of incredibly political people on it. There's people that I, really, really disagree with, and I think that they're taking the state in the wrong direction. And the fact that they want to say something, they don't have, they may not even have a connection to the university. They didn't go to the university. They don't live in Boone County. They don't live anywhere where there is a University of Missouri system school. And they were there because of, political reasons. And the fact that, they might have a priority as a senator from Boone County, that doesn't make it my priority for the university. I want the university to be successful, but in that, I define the university as not just the university leadership or the elites of the university. I define the university being successful as students and also the workers, the employees, the people who are working at the university. We talk about it being an economic engine, but if it's not a good place to work, then it's not as much of an economic engine anymore. And so I take a very holistic approach to what is good for the university. And I'm obviously, in contact with university leadership and with the board of curators and look at what their priorities are, but that doesn't inherently make it my priority. My priority is looking out for the people at the University of Missouri, whether they're students or workers. So that was the second bill I filed. I think it's kind of an interesting one. It's the first time anybody has done this. And this is really an effort to try to get back for the university workers and my constituents now, things that were taken away from them. Third bill that I want to mention, which I think is just kind of it's a long-term project. It's something that I just, it's not a bill that no donor cares about, but I just think is an important thing, which is the state paying for free lunch for all school students, regardless of income. So basically the way the bill set up is every district would have to opt into it. They would have to have, everybody who is eligible for federal funding apply for that federal funding, and the state would pay for everything else. And uh, just for some background, I mean, it varies from year to year, but roughly the Columbia Public Schools writes off around $100,000 a year in school lunch debt at the end of every year for students that haven't paid. And to me, this is about a few different things. Obviously, it's about making sure that every kid is put in the best position to be successful, right? That they're not worried about being hungry at school. It's about making sure that kids don't have to worry about the shame or feeling less than somebody because they have to go in front of their friends and say that that they're reduced lunch. I remember being at Columbia Public Schools and you'd be in line with your tray, and the kid in front of you might say that you'd have, at the time it was $1.25. I think it's like $3 now, but you'd have your dollar and a quarter, and then the kid in front of you would say reduced lunch and give them a quarter. And, I don't think 6 and 7 year olds need to be announcing their family's economic state in front of their friends. That's something we should put on a 6 or 7 year old or 8 year old or 9 year old to have to deal with. And I think that that's a very basic, I'm proud of the public school system this country has built. And I think when you send your kid off to that school, every parent ought to be able to do that. And that kid ought to have everything they need at that school. And you shouldn't have to worry about that. Final piece, and the part that I think that I hope parents would like, is just, I think it simplifies things. You don't have to worry about, does your kid have money left on their account? You don't have to worry about getting in fights because somebody forgot to update their lunch account or forgot their lunch money or something. Like, just let's simplify everybody's life. And we're already paying for everything else in the process of public school education. And so I think that that's a worthy thing to do. And then the fourth thing I want to talk about is I filed a bill after the success of Amendment 3, and this kind of leads into what I see coming down the session, which is repealing all of the now unconstitutional anti-abortion statutes in the Constitution. So as people, I'm sure this crowd knows, but when you pass a constitutional amendment, you still have all the statutes on the books. And they're not technically unconstitutional until a court has adjudicated that they're unconstitutional, even if they're unconstitutional. And so now, that coalition of the ACLU and Planned Parenthood and Repro Action and different groups that worked on Amendment 3 have to go through and they have to file lawsuits to try to get rid of all of the statutes that are on the books. And they've already started that process. But I think, as a statement, like the voters of Missouri approved this, and we should respect that, and we should get rid of these statutes, and we shouldn't delay care. We shouldn't drive up legal costs for everybody. And I've been hearing for a long, long time about the Constitution being the most important thing, and Republicans believing in the Constitution and the Constitution first. Okay, real simple. Like, let's put the Constitution first and let's respect what the Constitution says, and let's get rid of this unconstitutional statutes that are currently on the books. So I took a bill that Lauren Arthur had filed previously. I think one thing I added to it was specifically getting rid of the admitting privileges requirement. And that was because the reason we lost abortion services in mid-Missouri was because at the time the University of Missouri revoked admitting privileges to Planned Parenthood before the trigger law. And once Planned Parenthood in Missouri had lost admitting privileges at a hospital, they couldn't perform abortion services anymore. So I specifically included that piece kind of as a, I don't know, a recognition of the obstacles that we faced here in mid-Missouri. And that's kind of a good, I think, transition. And I'll just talk for just a couple minutes on what I see coming this session, and I'll turn it over to Greg. They're going to come after Amendment 3. For sure. The challenge that they're going to have. So the challenge that we had as a movement, I guess, was 2 years ago figuring out what sort of IP proposal was going to be initiative petition proposal was going to be put forward. Right. It's really easy to say that you're pro-choice, but then you say, okay, we're going to actually try to draft the language and the what's actually included, and it's really, really difficult. And it took a while to do that. It was a really messy process. I was not part of that process, but I know obviously a lot of folks who were doing it, and it was tough. And there was a lot of these different choice groups had different visions and different things, and how far should we go and stuff like that. Well, they worked it out and they were successful. And now the Republicans have that challenge. Like, they have to figure out what bill they want to put forward, and what they're going to include. So they definitely will have the votes at some point for something, but they have to figure out what that's going to be, and that's going to be really tough for them. So at some point, there will be a fight over Amendment 3. From my perspective, the time for any sort of compromise was before they passed you don't get to compromise, like losers don't get to compromise. Like if they want to compromise 15 years ago, could have been talk of compromise, but they didn't compromise when they were banning abortion. They obviously didn't compromise when they banned rape victims from having abortion. They didn't compromise when they were trying to limit people's access to contraception. And so, from my perspective, when voters pass something, we have to respect that. And so, I'm not interested in trying to find any sort of compromise. The time for that is over. I'm interested in defending what the voters have said, and that to me is a pretty bright line. I believe that for a lot of reasons. I believe that on this issue. I believe that on Medicaid. I believe that on right to work. When the voters pass something, we have to respect it. And so I'm gearing up for that fight. I know that's going to be a big one. I think they're going to go after the St. Louis local control, the St. Louis City Police. That's not an issue that directly impacts anybody in Boone County. But I think it's important in terms of sort of the local control component of that is going to be really important for Democrats going forward. And then the budget, so the appropriations, I got the worst luck when it comes to appropriations. As folks know, I was elected in 2008. So I came in 2009 to the state house, was when the economy was crashing. It was a terrible budget year. And then the last few years, the budget's actually been pretty good because in large part of the federal funding that's come down. And while everybody's been complaining, Republicans have been complaining about Democrats in DC, they've been spending the money that was sent. That money is drying up, and revenues are basically flat. And so this will be a tighter budget year coming up than we've had. So maybe I'm the problem, I guess. I come in tough budget years. But that will, I don't think it's going to be a crisis initially, but at some point there's going to be pressure on, things like schools, things like the universities, to compete for dwindling resources. So I'm going to ask to be on the appropriations committee. We haven't even formed committees. We don't form committees until after we've been inaugurated. So I don't know what committees there will be, but I know that I will be asking to be on the approps committee. It's small in the Senate. There's not a lot of spots, so I may not get a slot, but I'm going to try and put myself in a position to be advocates for a town that relies on public funding. So with that, I'll shut up and thank you all, and happy to take any questions at the end.
Thank you, Stephen. You're looking forward to this process.
What's that?
Are you looking forward to this?
I am. I'm really excited. I understand that next time I talk to you, I probably will not be excited. I'll probably be aspirated. I'll be frustrated. I'll be angry. I know that, but right now I'm really excited. This is something I've been working for a long time. This is something a lot of people have helped me for a long time, and so I am looking forward to doing this. And look, I know what I'm going to. It's a Republican governor, Republican supermajorities. There's going to be a lot of tough days. But this is an opportunity I asked for. And like I said, I may not be excited later, but I am excited now. So I'm happy about that.
Best of luck, Stephen.
Thank you. And Stephen, you have 4 years. 4 years. Keep reminding yourself, you've got 4 years. That's great.
I appreciate it.
Maybe 8, probably 8.
Yeah.
Well, and I didn't run to do nothing. I'll tell you that much. So I'm gonna use this this ability as hard as I can for as much time as I'm able to do it.
Okay. Gregg Bush, welcome to Muleskinners and to your new role as representative from District 50, and tell us what your perspective is and what your priorities are.
Yeah. Thanks, Al. I appreciate that. And thank you, Stephen, for this rundown of your priorities. I think we share a lot of the same priorities. It's, I guess, we are each other's bosses, and that you live in the 50th, so you're my boss. And
that's true. We do. We represent each other.
That's right. I was just explaining to my 8-year-old that, so I just quit from MU Healthcare after being there for 18 years, that I now have 36,000 bosses, including mommy. Mommy is now my boss. And I have 20,000 registered bosses actually in House District 50. Yeah, and thank you, Muleskinners, for kind of hosting this. I'm interested in hearing about your priorities, and I'm excited to share with you some things that I've been working on and kind of how I see things going forward. For those of you that don't know me, I am new to the legislative process and being on the other side of the desk, as it were. Not new going down to Jeff City and being an advocate for things that I believe in. The 50th is kind of really a unique place in that it's rather affluent, but people with like really big hearts live here as well, and they want the best for Columbia. They want the best for Boone County. And what we do here, I know that other counties, as best they can, sometimes want to be more like us in that we do lots of great things here in terms of public-private partnerships, in terms of the contingents relationship with our county government as well. Like this is something that other people are looking towards of trying to kind of emulate in other parts of the state. So we're really, really fortunate here having so many great representatives. So I have not been sworn in. I'll be sworn in January 8th. I just hired a legislative assistant a little bit ago. His name is Austin Stidham. And I'm taking a unique view of this process as well, in that I'm going to actually have in-district staff as well. Her name is Rachel Stallings. So I want to make sure that constituents can reach me, that feel that they're going to be heard. I want a lot of eyes, a lot of hands listening to constituents, making sure that we show up to things, making sure that we can help them my constituents cut red tape if needed, and being an extra pair of advocates, not only kind of at the Capitol, but also in district. If I can't be there, I'm gonna have somebody from my office being there without taking legislative aid away as well. So that's gonna be a new thing that I'm gonna be doing. I'm really gonna be focusing on constituent services. I think that's part of being a representative as well, making sure that people feel like they are represented, not just by an elected official, but also by staff members. So I have to kind of balance these things. Things that are important to me, obviously healthcare. Being an RN, I was at MU Healthcare, like I said, for 18 years. Stephen did not overstate the kind of cuts that happened specifically to employees of the University of Missouri system and to MU Healthcare, the place where I started as a janitor and was able to go to nursing school at the University of Missouri, graduated from their accelerated program. And, after, it was the time when Gary 4C was there that we kind of started getting these cuts to our retirement, started getting more burdens placed on the healthcare worker and the university worker as in terms of like pensions and benefits and those types of things. And it just keeps happening and happening and happening. To my former coworkers, the people that I like, the people that cared for me and saved my life when I was an inpatient in the hospital. That's not an exaggeration. They really did save my life there. So some things that I'm going to be focused on, I haven't pre-filed anything yet. I'm still talking with constituents. Again, I just got hired up. Stephen has the benefit of a wonderful chief of staff in Carly Seek, who's been kind of entrenched for a long time. I mean that as a good thing, of finding all those levers that she and he can pull to make sure that an agenda can kind of go forward. I was just on a call, I think it was 2 days ago now. Something that I'm really going to be focusing on is what can Missouri do in terms of regulating bodies. January 20th is going to change a lot of things for this country. That will be the inauguration of the next president. And it's kind of all over the map with what's going to be happening. If the regulatory bodies, and I'm not trying to scare anybody, but if federal regulatory bodies go away, what can the states do? And so there's actually groups working on that right now with Chevron, which was administrative law judges kind of making and executive agencies making the specific recommendations and the specific regulations. With Chevron going away, lawmakers are now going to be making those regulations, not industry or consumer advocacy groups or executive branch like the EPA. Experts at the EPA are going to have said in the past of what lead levels are, what copper levels are like. Well, now it's going to need to be specific excuse me, it's going to need to be specific in the law. So lawmakers are going to be needing to make those. So we're going to have to get really specific in terms of making sure that we have good consumer protections, we have good environmental protections, we have good labor protections for Missouri. So those are things that I am looking at. Another thing, and I just came from a meeting today with an immigration lawyer. I anticipated your question, David. Very good. I just came with somebody who has a long history in terms of immigration law as well. You know, my spouse, her parents were here legally, and she is a U.S. citizen under the 14th Amendment. But there's some significant things in my community, in my district. I have an immigrant, a highly educated and fluent immigrant population. I've already taken meetings, and they are concerned with what's going to be happening after January 20th, and they need to have an advocate down there to make sure that what does, again, after January 20th, what does it look like? There's very little that we know right now other than claims that are being made by the federal government, but how can we empower our local stakeholders and local folks to make sure that we protect our citizens, protect our neighbors. And she and I are going to be working together and making sure that we kind of do the right thing. In Texas, they just passed a law and kind of confluence between that and healthcare. Texas just passed a law that just went into effect last month, that they are essentially deputizing physicians and nurses, needing to make sure that they look at citizenship status of anybody that comes through the ED or the ER. As a nurse, I find that offensive. I want to take care of my patients, and I think healthy people on our roads, irrespective of their citizenship status, is better for everybody, making sure that people can seek care no matter what. So that's something that I'm looking at, is making sure, I don't exactly know how to do this yet, but making sure that nurses and healthcare providers can simply provide healthcare and not worry about immigration status or citizenship status of anybody that comes in seeking our help. Those are that's something that I'm looking at. And then healthcare workforce is something else that I'm looking at. Look, we have a shortage of nurses, physicians. Physicians are fleeing the state. We have a shortage of teachers as well, including with Stevens' bill. And I support this bill for basically state-sponsored lunches for everybody. That's actually going to decrease the kind of behaviors that I'm hearing from teachers that are really making the classroom more difficult and more challenging to teach in. If you have a hungry kid, I know when my 8-year-old gets hungry, heck, when my 16-year-old gets hungry, he's unpleasant. When I'm hungry, I'm unpleasant. If we can somehow get kids calories, making sure that they can, stay focused on, classroom tasks of what it means to be a good friend. I mean, my 8-year-old is learning how to be a friend right now, and how to kind of interact in a social setting. And then 16-year-old like learning, advanced math, right? These are all things that if you're hungry, you're not going to be able to focus. You're going to have more behaviors. You're going to lash out at teachers. You're going to have these things that make a classroom that is untenable. So actually, I support this bill. They have done this in Minnesota as well. I've had friends that actually worked on that legislation in Minnesota out of the governor's office. And they've actually seen some really good things. And we need to be protecting, again, our public school. Is something that Stephen and I share. To let you know a little bit more, I just got back from a 2-week-long bus trip with a bunch of the freshman legislators. There's 55 of us. There's about 45 of us that when I was fortunate enough to be able to go for 2 weeks or both weeks. And I'm building relationships. Look, in the super minority, we're not setting the agenda, but I am finding people that share my values in other parts of the state and working with them. Actually had 2 people offer, I don't want to say their names, I don't want to embarrass them, but actually 2 people, hey, if you need me to carry a bill, let me know, because we share a lot of the same values. So my name might not be on things, or I may be a co-sponsor of something, but bear in mind, I'm going to be down there finding those people and advocating for our issues, particularly around healthcare. We've had 14 hospitals close since 2022, many of them in the surrounding counties from Boone. That's putting pressure on our healthcare system here. It's really significant. Wait times are up. They're canceling surgeries, canceling appointments, canceling interventions because they just can't find providers. There's kind of a real hostility to experts being able to do the things that they've been trained to do, by either through regulations, particularly around abortion, and birth, and contraception and things like these. We have trained people who are able to do these things, and because of the supermajority that's been down there, we're not able to actually accomplish those. Our trained providers are not. And again, I'm finding people throughout. So I'm working on building those kinds of relationships. I have an office. It's going to be 109E, so I'll be up on the first floor, up on like the second level. And again, I'll have my own LA, and I'm really going to be focusing on constituent services, helping the men and women that work at MU, and making sure that they feel heard and listened to, and making it like a real flagship institution, not only for our town and for our county, but I, at a gathering at a friend's house around Halloween, I met the last person that's going to be getting a PhD in sociology from the University of Missouri. They've cut the graduate program. So we have a flagship institution that's not going to be creating new knowledge about society. So sociology is a study of society, right? I think that's a tragic thing. And that is a direct result of the persistent attacks on public education from Jeff City, and kind of them needing to have some kind of making priorities with the
that's pretty outrageous. That's pretty outrageous.
It is. I think so too. I was excited to meet her, and at the same time, I was heartbroken to meet this person. She came here specifically to study this because we have a flagship institution connected right with a VA, and her new knowledge is going to be the last that the University of Missouri is going to be producing for sociology. Look, a lot of headwinds we're going to be having down there. I'm excited. I am not quite apprehensive, but at the same time, I think I found some ways forward, and it remains to be seen kind of, what happens when committees get formed. I'm going to be asking to be on the budget committee. I know that's kind of pie in the sky, but budgets are moral documents, and we need, that's what I believe, and I might have the good fortune of being on that. Obviously, mental health and healthcare committee, want to be on that, and I'm actually looking. I've finally just kind of made a decision today. After I'm going to be filing my committee request and looking to be on corrections as well. We have 20,000 people in our state prisons. The largest healthcare facility in Boone County is the sheriff's jail. We need to be starting to think about how we care for and treat people that have been incarcerated, how to reintegrate, what reentry looks like, and making sure that they get the care they need. I don't have all of the answers sitting right in front of me, but we got to start asking these questions. How are we going to make sure that we think about public safety, and well, making sure that people that are in distress, particularly in jails and other places, are actually getting treatment and care that they need and deserve. So I hope that's, and I thank you again for allowing this. And
thank you, Greg. I think we're going to be well represented in both the Senate and the House. Any questions for Greg or Stephen? Or comments? Sue, Herb?
Thank you both very greatly for your demonstrable public service commitments. Thank you very much. And thank you also for being here. In return, I will do my usual and pose a question that may be hard to answer. It is evident, I think, to all of us that the Democratic Party's grand strategy, state and national, needs refinement. Implicitly, as observed by many campaign strategists, we tend to try to accumulate an assortment of minorities by appealing by this policy and another, and we have a reputation for that, especially among the undecided and the uncommitted. Not enough. What, in addition, should we do? Stephen has the perspective of being a past party, state party chair. You, Greg, have the great benefit of being new, and those who are new frequently see things clearly that even the experienced underestimate. So I give you this problem to solve. Both of you.
Yeah, thank you. I am not convinced I see things clearly. I'm going to do my best to really kind of decipher and kind of cut through some of this. What can Democrats do? Look, so many things. There have been many column inches have been devoted to things that Kamala Harris did wrong or did right or wasn't exciting enough or whatever it is. I mean, this is a hard nut to crack. And I think this has to really go back to building, I hate to be this broken, building relationships. And I've said this before, this is hand-to-hand politics. There's so many people that I met that were not Democrats or liberals or progressives when I was door knocking, but they got to see me as a person and I got to share with them my values. And they're like, oh, well, that makes a lot of sense. You're a thoughtful individual. You're a good listener. And I trust that you're going to make the right decision when it kind of comes down, because lots of people are kind of disengaged. So we've got to get out in the community. Voters don't come to me. I got to go to them. These 20,000 bosses, registered bosses that I now have. Generally speaking, I think that there's opportunities to make headway in rural communities. And the reality is that there's the things that are happening in rural communities. It's some of it is partisan, but some of it is past partisan. People in rural communities want their clinics back. They want to be able to see their physicians. If they can go see a nurse practitioner, they want to go see a nurse practitioner. If they want good schools, this is not a partisan issue. I think that we need to continue to offer them not just taxes bad, but it's not what you pay, it's what you get. Do you want a school that's falling down? Do you want a police force that's not responsive because they don't have the right materials? Do you want fire departments that are unequipped? Well, your tax, or do you want potholes in your roads? This is what your tax dollars can provide. So we have to continue to tell them, this is what you're going to get with this money. You're going to benefit from it. Your neighbors are going to benefit from it. And you're going to be, and also listen to their suffering, also listen to their distress, the kind of challenges that they have. While Kansas lost seats as Kansas Democrats lost seat in their state house, we held firm in a kind of red wave-ish election. So I don't know what that means. Either we've hit our basement or we are getting better here in Missouri. I'd like to think it's the latter. I think we are getting better here at communicating to voters. I hope that answers your question, Herb.
Man, this is a tough one. And it's give me 4 or 5 hours, I probably wouldn't be able to cover everything. I'll just kind of hit a couple high points. First off, I think it is really important that we make sure that there's an accurate acknowledgement of the election, which there are going to be a lot of people on the right that they're already trying to do it, who are trying to make it act like it was a wave, it was a historic win. And that's not the case. I'm not saying this in terms of you get points for second place. It's a zero-sum game, and I think we should be very concerned. We should be 10 out of 10 concerned about what has happened and the fact that Trump was reelected. But I think it's also important that we push back that it was not, because he's trying to manufacture this narrative of it being a red wave year so that he has more freedom and leeway to push his agenda. And the fact is that congressionally, we did pick up seats in the U.S. House of Representatives. That does not happen in red waves years. And again, I'm not saying that to protect anybody or deflect any blame. I'm saying that because we need to pierce this this narrative that he's trying to run with and use for zone to try to accumulate even more power. So I think that it was an incredibly close election, and that needs to be kept in mind. Nationwide, and I've told people this a few times, in 2004 when John Kerry won, if you had said Barack Obama is the next president of the United States, or sorry, when John Kerry lost to George Bush in his second term, the next day after Kerry had lost, if you had said Barack Obama is the next president of the United States, literally nobody would have believed it, including Barack Obama. So, in 2012, when Obama was reelected, if you had said the next president of the United States is Donald Trump, nobody would have believed it. Maybe Donald Trump would have, but nobody else would have. So the idea, we have any idea who's going to win in 28 or what the path is going to be yet, we're not going to know. And what I tell everybody is also like, look, a bunch of Democratic candidates are going to run. We're going to have a primary. They're going to present different visions of the world, different visions of the country, different visions of the electorate. And the Democratic Party is going to pick which one of those visions we like better. And that's going to be the vision that we go with in 2028. So in that sense, while I think it is important to try to figure out what happened, I'm not being dismissive of that. I also think it's largely an unknowable thing that we can't even fathom what the next couple of years are going to bring. Now in Missouri, Missouri's tough. I mean, quite frankly, we're in a death spiral, and that's just what it is. One of our challenges now is that we have a harder time recruiting candidates, particularly outside of, Boone County is a little different because it's a shorter drive to Jeff City. But if you're from St. Louis or Kansas City or something like that, that's a real challenge. I would say the simplest thing we could do, this is delicate because it's going to hurt some people's feelings or whatever, but look, we have to focus on what's possible. I'm tired of every single cycle, people starting out saying, we're going to keep our eye on the ball. We're going to rebuild. And then at some point, a shiny object comes along and everybody gets distracted. And we have to have the discipline to not go for the shiny object, right? We were not going to win a statewide election in Missouri. That was obvious. A lot of people, I don't know what to tell you. Every poll I ever saw had none of the statewide races ever competitive. I was very disappointed. I think a lot of the statewide candidates, quite frankly, did some really unethical things with their polling that previous candidates never would have done to try to convince people they were competitive in order to raise money. I think that was dishonest, and I think it was borderline fraud to try to take money from a lot of people. And I wouldn't do that, and none of the people that I've worked for ever would have done that. But the reality is until we can win a state house race in St. Charles County, until we completely own Platte County, until we can flip a Senate seat in Springfield, I would have said until we, completely could dominate Boone County, but we've been able to do that now. But until we can do those things, until we can win these borderline, until we can win a legislative race in St. Charles County, which we won in 2008 and haven't won one since, like statewide stuff's not competitive. Like there's no path to winning a statewide race in Missouri until we've been able to take these other smaller hills. And so in 2026, there's not going to be a gubernatorial race. There's not going to be a U.S. Senate race. And I think we really need to focus on making gains in the legislature because that is an important component to being statewide competitive again. It's the idea of like, how are we going to compete statewide? We have to be disciplined and recognize it is at this point in every cycle, everybody says it's going to be 2 years. It's going to be like a 6-year or 8-year or 10-year plan. And then, some candidate goes out and tells everybody they're going to win. Everybody gets excited. Like, it's got to be a 6, 8, 10-year plan. Sorry.
Dave Mallory.
Thank you, Al. I have a question for Gregg. Gregg, you mentioned that you resigned from the hospital. I'm guessing that's because the position in the hospital was a full-time position and now you're going to be part-time legislator, or was it because they forced you to? They wouldn't want to allow you to be in the legislature and at the hospital at the same time? The last part of the
yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
You plan to do to offset some of that lost income?
So I am going to be a full-time legislator, full-time advocate for my district. My loyalties are to my family, to my values, and to my district. Right? Those are my values. I am really kind of blessed that I have a spouse that's way smarter than I am, and she's able to make up. I haven't had a paycheck since February, but she's been able to make up a lot of that extra income and stuff. So yeah. And the rules of the University of Missouri say that you cannot do both. Frankly, you can't even run for office if you are an employee of the University of Missouri. That I think that has been inconsistently applied in the past specifically. But alas, I am full-time citizen, legislator, and advocate.
Peter.
Yeah, I wasn't able to keep my mouth shut after Stephen said that. So, we are a red state, no doubt, but also Kentucky's a red state, and they have a Democratic governor And if you have pragmatic policies and are thoughtful in how you approach the electorate, even in red states, Democrats have a chance to win at statewide level. So don't give up. There's still a chance.
Thank you. So,
Yes, I just had a quick thing. One of the things that I find many of the publics and many of the people running for office talk about how they'll reduce taxes. I don't know if you folks have paid, a lot of you have paid attention to how much you're paying for insurance. In particular, our car that's a 2017 is costing us for a year on insurance over $1,400. Now it doesn't have the fancy new safety gadgets on it, and we are over 80. However, our house, now we have a modest house by comparison with some folks, but still a lot nicer than many. And we have a house, and we've owned it for a long time, 50 years this year. But our taxes, to not counting our personal property, are just over 2,000. Well, I can tell you one hell, we get a lot more from that 2,000 plus, 2,100 plus than we do for the goddamn health and car insurance. And so anybody that starts doing, I would start making that kind of emphasis of saying, okay, how much do you pay for your medical insurance? If we had universal health, how much do you pay for your house insurance? How much do you pay for your car insurance? Add that up and compare it with your local taxes. I'm just giving
That's a really good point, Sue. Thank you. That's a really, I'll be sure to remember that and bring that up, because you're right, that they're going to throw that in our face at some point, and we'll remind people of that.
Well, I just was shocked. It was close to 750 for 6 months, and I just thought, hell, this is gauging. I can't think of the word. I am so mad. Okay, thanks.
Kathy asked a question earlier about whether there's any action toward fixing the pension issue for county sheriffs and prosecutors. And that because, of course, relates to the that was voted down in November.
Amendment 6, I think it was, or 7, 6, I think. No, I've not had any conversations with anybody after that. I'm sure that the issue hasn't gone away, so I'm sure that they will. But my guess is that they probably don't have a plan yet. I mean, that was their plan. So I'm sure that we'll hear something at some point, but I have not heard anything yet.
Yeah, maybe a concept of a plan, huh?
Right.
Any other questions? Dave Robinson.
I want to follow up on Peter's comment and this issue of long-term and short-term positioning and values and maybe even advertising. Because I think Herb and I had the same argument last week, and then it occurred to me this song that I love by Diane Washington, which is, I'm going to be around to pick up the pieces when somebody breaks your heart. You know, there's a sense in which the Democratic leaders and activists, you know, can always be ready for the disaster. Dinah Washington, right, Dinah Washington. And by the way, it's much better when Dinah does it than when Frank Sinatra does it. It happens quickly. It happens with the collapse of housing and the financial system when Barack Obama was elected. It happens with the pandemic and total disarray that elected Joe Biden, who didn't even more or less campaign in 2020. So if we've somehow got the program for being ready to take over when somebody breaks their hearts, I think we can kind of resolve this. What do we do with the short term? What do we do with the long term? The long term, we've got to be kind of visible about it, but we've also got to have people ready to move when things collapse. And I'm not like Lenin, hoping for the most horrible collapse, which of course they had in Russia when Lenin took over. But that's kind of the way politics has gone since that time. When there's a terrible disaster, then people will say, okay, give these other people the chance. Democrats have to be ready. I don't know if they are. They're having big controversies. I think our revolution and all that challenged the current the Clintonite Democrats.
We are not to
on
blame. We are not at fault. We are not to blame.
Yeah, and one thing I'll just add to what you said about being here to pick up the pieces. One thing that Greg and I have in common, and one of the things I actually really, when I got to know Greg last year. Well, one thing that we have in common is we both lost races, and we both come back and not given up. And so I absolutely share that sentiment with everybody on this call. And when I actually really got to know Greg, I obviously met him before, but when I got to know him is when we were doing the Columbia Civic Academy about 2 years ago, and he'd lost the city council race. And I was so impressed that he was still doing, even after losing, he was still doing something to learn about our community. And this was before he knew that there was going to be a legislative race to run for. And so I think that spirit and that attitude of never giving up is something that he and I both embody. And to be very clear, like, look, I want to win. I don't think there aren't too many people in Missouri. There's a few, but there aren't too many people in Missouri who've worked harder on statewide races over the last, 12 years than I have. I want to win one. I want the Democratic Party to win one. I'm trying to say that there is a way that we're going about it will make it increase the probability of us being able to win one sooner versus not. And I think that in order to increase those probabilities, and I had two former staffers of mine worked for Andy Bashir, so I'm intimately involved and knowledgeable of how that went down. But there are steps that we can do, and there's things that we can do to increase our odds of that happening, and there are things that we can do to reduce those odds. And focusing on winning some legislative races is, in the long run, going to increase those odds for us.
Maureen.
Just very quickly to pick up the pieces, 1976, right? It was right after Watergate. Democrats were there, and then also 1992, the SNL crisis, and that's when Bill Clinton won. As also Democrats have always there's always been this kind of crisis. So I will go back even further.
All right.
Yeah, my question pertains to partly to Amendment 3, but it's more general than that. There was an excellent editorial in the Missouri Independent this morning about how the very same person, the Attorney General, who argued prior to the election that Amendment 3 would wipe out all state regulation of health care related to abortion and contraception, and now is arguing in court that all of those laws, those trap laws, need to remain. So my question is, I think Stephen kind of addressed that specific point, but my question has to do with the broader initiative petition process and whether or not there is a will to block efforts, which will inevitably be coming, to change that process to make it more difficult, either by making it more expensive or increasing the requirements or putting it something on the ballot for next time to try to make it harder for citizens to actually have an initiative.
Yeah, so I'm really curious about how much pressure they put on that this year. I will say, to me, that's probably the most important issue because so many other issues depend on it, right? I mean, you can talk about labor issues, but it was a referendum on right to work. You can talk about healthcare, but that's how we expanded Medicaid. We've used it to expand the minimum wage a couple times. I don't know whether they're going to just go after Amendment 3 specifically, or whether that's going to be part of the discussion. Strangely, there's a Republican billionaire, Rex Sinfeld, who is very against changing the IP process. So there's strange allies in the world. So that has been helpful to us in terms of stopping it. And then the major sort of engine was Bill Eigel behind it, and so he's gone now. So I don't know who's going to pick up the mantle from him. So I'm not sure whether that's going to be a big push or not. If you're betting, you'd bet over the next, if it's not this session, over the next 5 sessions, for sure it's going to come back. And to me, that's a die on the hill issue because so many other issues are tied to it.
Thank you. Nancy?
I want to second what Stephen was getting at there with the legislative races. I think nationally, we're in pretty good shape for 4 years from now because we've got a really good bench. There are lots of state senators, U.S. senators and governors to choose from, and reps for that matter. So I really think for the next 4 years or 2 years or whatever, we need to be focusing on these legislative races. We've got to really build our bench in Missouri, because that's what the problem is in trying to get a statewide person elected, is that we've got to have a strong bench.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Any other questions or comments? Well, I thank you both for being here, and again, wish you the best of luck down there in the legislature.
Thank you all very much. And thank you for everything you all have done, both the last cycle and for years before that.
Good luck.
Thanks.
Thank you.
It's going to take all of us. Thank you.
Keep the
Thanks
faith,
so much.
baby.
Thank you.
Stephen and Greg.
So going into our regular meeting, we already have